Hey everyone, and welcome back again. Today I want to have a discussion about the state of hunters in the current metagame and why I think right now hunters are facing a lot of challenges and maybe not the greatest in the metagame. I wanted to quickly get this out of the way though. I am a hunter main, so this might seem a little biased, but I want to be clear that the point of this video and this discussion is not to talk or comment on the state of the balance of the game or complain about hunters' potential in it. That's not the point. The point for me is to take things that I've observed and observations I've made that I think are challenges for Hunter right now in this current metagame, evaluate them, and think about some solutions. How can we use those observations and formulate solutions for them to evolve Hunters in the current metagame and have good answers for those challenges? So let's talk about the problems that I've noticed for Hunter in the current metagame. Right now, the Immortal and aggressive SMGs are really popular, and I think Titans are kind of at the top of the food chain right now. They, I think, in my opinion, are the best class in the game, mainly because of Striker or even Sentinel, and their ability to amplify the strength of SMGs with Peacekeepers. Hunters right now, I think, are kind of at the bottom, and I would lead with the main problem being that SMGs, or I should say aggressive SMGs, have a very fast TTK. They have a 0.67 second optimal TTK. That's in 9 shots, and that's up to, I believe, 8 resilience. And with target lock, they are actually an 8 crit kill in 0.6 seconds, which is, again, insanely fast, and that's up until 7 resilience. The problem for hunters mainly is that they are a class that requires all 3 of those top stats: mobility, resilience, and recovery. Unlike the other 2 classes, I think most people would agree that you can give up mobility or a good amount of it on Titans and Warlocks in favor of whatever the required resilience value is and the best recovery to go along with that. Hunters don't have this option in most cases unless you're willing to forego your dodge cooldown, and that's again because the mobility stat is tied to your dodge cooldown, and in my opinion the dodge is an integral part of the Hunter kit. For that reason, again, we need all 3 stats: mobility, resilience, and recovery, which means we're gonna have to do some pretty crazy min-maxing to get the best value of all of them, or ultimately make the call to give up one of them, and usually that one given up is resilience. However, now that's really becoming a problem for Hunter players because your time to kill is not going to be as good as the next player on a Titan or Warlock utilizing the Immortal or using target lock on the Immortal, because they're gonna have a 0.6 second TTK against you while you have a slower 0.67, or if you're not hitting target lock, again 0.77 against them because they're hitting 7 or 8 resilience. So it's overall just going to be an uphill battle if both players are playing fairly well with their aim. What makes this worse is the loss of powerful friends. Those 2 free tiers essentially of mobility are now things that we actually have to spec into, which means that's 2 tiers of resilience or recovery, that we now have to put into mobility, which makes it that much harder. In contrast to Titans, this is really rough because Titans typically go for 10 resilience for their barricade cooldowns or the thruster cooldown, and then try and go for somewhere around 10 recovery, between 8 and 10 I would say. And then mobility, they get to give up on mobility, probably hitting 2 or 3, but they make up for that by using Peacekeepers and having an additional 5 tiers from using what is probably commonly accepted as the best weapon in the game right now, an aggressive SMG. So their build ends up looking like something around 8-10-8 or 8-10-10, which is pretty crazy. Again, in contrast to Hunters especially. Because again, not only are we losing the fight in terms of strafe speed against them, we're also losing the fight in terms of our best possible time to kill versus theirs against Hunters. So again, I think that SMGs are just a uphill battle for Hunters right now. Problem number 2, I think, is that Hunter does not have an ability like barricades or rifts for area control. It's harder to take space on the Hunter since it involves you actually being in combat and putting yourself in some form of danger, and as a result, it's harder to challenge snipers. Problem number 3 is I think that Hunter has some weaker or at least just slower charging supers for their stronger options. The bubbles and wells right now are fast charging, and they're hard to counter while you're in the neutral game and you don't have a super to counter them with. On top of it, they also take and establish control of areas on the map with ease. If it isn't those supers, Thunder Crash is still a pretty good charge speed, and it's a shutdown super with a bit of roaming potential. Less so because it was nerfed, which is noticeable, but it still has a little bit of that potential and can at least put pressure in that regard. Now, that's enough of the problems that I've noticed as a Hunter main in the current meta. Let's talk about some solutions now. I think for number one, we have two trains of thought. I'll go over the first one, which is going to be find ways to boost our mobility so we can hit the appropriate resilience level to be more competitive with the Immortal, and this would allow us to use the Immortal a little bit ourselves as well. So how exactly would you do that though? Well, I think using lightweight weapons is key to this. Since we are lacking powerful friends now, we want to use lightweight weapons like Rose or any weapons that have the lightweight frame on it, because that's going to give us an additional 2 tiers of mobility when we have them drawn out. Other lightweight weapons include, I mentioned this earlier, but Le Monarque, Fighting Lion, and the Chaperone. So if you can incorporate those weapons into your loadout, those are 3 pretty strong weapons that, you know, are quite usable that you can include in your loadout. Some of which, in the case of the Le Monarque and Fighting Lion, can be used with the Immortal to be used as your lightweight weapon to get your dodge cooldown from, and then still have a very strong primary weapon. And not to mention, those weapons again are crazy on their own. So definitely utilize those. You can see on my Le Monarque build, I'm actually able to get 8 mobility, 8 resilience, and 8 recovery. That is a very high stat total. This is on Void with Night Stalker, but a very high stat total, which becomes 10, 8, 8, covering all my bases. A recovery that's only 1 second less than 10, a resilience value that completely counters the aggressive SMGs, and a mobility value that when combined with my lightweight weapon, Le Monarque, will become 10 mobility. So we get everything. Dragon Shadow, especially with the Stompies nerfs, is a good option because Stompies does tank your in-air effectiveness stat, and some people really don't like it. But if you're looking for some sort of similar mobility boost on top of having a really fast handling boost and scalar on top of that, the Dragon Shadow is a top pick, and I've seen a lot of good players use this. And the reason why this is a pick for maximizing on your mobility is because the Dragon Shadow, when the perk is active, gives you bonus tiers of mobility, which means that so long as you're staying alive while the perk's active, you're getting that mobility back to your dodge cooldown when it matters, which is when you don't have your dodge. So this is a great way to maximize and just min-max on your stats. This allows you to go for something like 7 or 8 resilience and as much recovery as you can after that. So those are some things that you can do if you're looking to try and reach that resilience value while not giving up too much of the other 2 values, mobility and recovery. Well, let's talk about the next train of thought that you can approach, or a different approach to this. Just give up on resilience and SMGs. So if you look at some of my builds here, you'll see that I only have 2 resilience. This is the minimum that I recommend. So go down to 2 resilience, go fully into mobility and recovery. Let's see, on a different build, you can see I have 10 to 10, and use different weapons, I would say. Try out sidearms. Sidearms like Drang or even Allied Demand and even Traveler's Chosen, these have a 0.6 second optimal TTK and 4 headshots. That is competitive with the Immortal with target lock. The last word in Lucky Pants is a Hunter exclusive combo that I've returned to that is really lethal and problematic for SMGs. The last word is one of the only things that can out TTK the target lock Immortal with a 3 tap at 0.53 seconds. You combine that with the Lucky Pants and their accuracy of the last word is insane. It can even hit yellow numbers at further ranges when it's getting damage drop off pretty consistently and doesn't rely on the Fanfire perk to gain its accuracy. So even hitting a 4 tap for a 0.8 second kill when you're both receiving damage drop off can be good enough. And not to mention that the last word's still a hand cannon, so you get to be able to utilize that peak shoot advantage where you are dealing higher burst damage than an SMG, which is problematic at times for SMGs to deal with. Once again, this is a Hunter exclusive combo that is still very competitive. I think there's a few exotics that you can leverage as well, combined with those weapons that I mentioned. The Mask of Baccharis is a way to completely counter someone's momentum and what they're expecting mid-gunfight, and it breaks the target lock perk. Arachne's Facade reduces flinch to make sure that you're getting your headshots out if you're on target, and gives you DR, so you put them on basically having to only hit headshots, and if they don't, they're probably going to get out TTK'd because of the damage resistance. Moving on now to problem number 2, which is Titan's mainly ability to establish area control with the barricade. Remember, number 1, I think that radar manipulation is exclusive to Hunter. Things like the Gemini gestures to rob the radar from your opponents can open them up for flanks from positions even off of teammates in those flanks that they weren't expecting, and you can enable that on Hunter. My favorite, of course, is playing Invis. Playing Invis allows you to go undetected and go for flanks or come from positions. Even if it is just different ranges, you can catch someone off guard with that, and this is really, really powerful. So I would say utilize the radar manipulation that right now is pretty much exclusive to Hunter to regain space that they're taking. Radar manip also makes opponents pretty uncomfortable. You can do things like even regain taken space by forcing them out of positions, by putting a snare bomb on a flank that isn't actually a player, forcing them to leave their position and give up some form of map control that you can now take. The Trip Mine Gauntlets, Young Ahamkara Spine, are insanely strong. The radius of the Trip Mines and damage output is crazy, and on top of it, they give you a regen speed that allows it to kind of compete with the Barricade's regen speed. So this is a great way to provide area denial and again to take back space from barricades or counter barricades. Even things like dust fields, if you use them at 10 discipline, and the enhanced dust fields on Hunter specifically with the crystal and certain fragments, I think the recharge fragment, I think it's Whisper of Shards, allows you to get dust fields really quickly to keep up with barricades cooldown so that you can counter barricades with area denial. Lastly, Stompies are still an insanely strong exotic. I know the AE penalty sucks for a lot of players and they don't favor it, but the movement speed, being able to quickly jump on those opponents when they're vulnerable, or able to bait opponents out of positions by faking a flank or just baiting them out towards you and going back to your team, is still really strong. And lastly, to address problem number 3, I think keeping up with supers is a little bit difficult, but some of you asked me why I ran 9 intellect in my mobility resilience recovery video, and that's because I want to make my spectral blades have a give or take 7-minute cooldown. This allows me to better try and keep up with the faster super regen rates of the supers like Wells, Bubbles, Thunder Crashes, so that I have a strong super that I feel like can take them on. In combination with high intellect, as something that I would suggest, you can use things like Dynamo and Distribution. These give a chunk of super and are incredibly synergistic with the dodge, especially if you're running Gambler's Dodge, giving you just a ton of super energy, just big chunks of super energy just for dodging near your opponent, and that can really help you keep up. Lastly, I think things like the Revenant, Silence, and Squall, as well as the Blade Barrage on the Gunslinger, are good shutdown supers that can charge at a decent rate to combat Bubbles and Wells. Even the Tether on Night Stalker is a pretty fast cooldown. I don't think these supers are quite as strong, but they do help you keep up in the super clock, and I think that's really, really important. So those are my main observations that I've noticed where Hunters seem to have some difficulty in the current metagame, and my solutions to go along with that. I hope to show you guys in the coming days my complete full builds. I've kind of glanced through them a little bit in this video, and you've probably seen a little bit of them now, but I want to show you guys my full builds that I'll be using for the season in days to come, as well as a little bit more in-depth video on things like the last word and sidearms and how they compete in the current meta as well, and just how I've kind of incorporated these solutions that I feel like I've thought of into these builds and into my playstyle now as a Hunter main that probably won't be switching off a Hunter, I think, ever. So hope you guys enjoyed the discussion, and thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.